I never talked about being a single mom with 2 kids. They did not know. No one knew how much I was struggling. I just appeared successful, but I never said I was successful. I just appeared successful.
Dr Ann Kaplan Mulholland, an award-winning entrepreneur, investor, author, TV personality, and real estate mogul.
When it comes to the business side of it, when I started to be an entrepreneur and started a business, it was figuring out how to raise funds. At the same time, you're figuring out how to do your operations. So I pitched, I guess, 30, 35 investment banks. The door slammed on all of them. When you're an entrepreneur, when you are successful, even if you start a business, you need to differentiate yourself. Nowadays, if you ignore the media channels, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, if you ignore that, you are not building a business. You are irrelevant if you are not on social media. You actually don't exist.
Welcome to Screw It, Just Do It, the show for those who decided to screw it and just did it. This is the podcast that brings you face-to-face with the entrepreneurs and business rebels who threw caution to the wind and built something extraordinary. Let's start with something that might come on their radar really soon, which is a TV series. So let's start with The Castle. Can you tell me what made you take the leap to buy and rebuild a 1,000-year-old fortress, and how does it compare to everything that you've built previously?
So it's interesting that you asked that, because it was not something that was planned, but I've always been extremely hardworking and very focused, and I've built many businesses. And it's about removing that can't do and then can't to the can do. So there has to be a reason why you're building a business, why you want to take something from scratch and do it. And I find that often people look at something and they say, I've got this really, really good idea, and then they go for it. But if you reverse engineer your distribution channels and you say, how am I going to distribute my idea? And then you go back to your idea, you will change your idea and you will be better at business. So you can be an entrepreneur, but being a good business person and entrepreneur, being successful and being very successful are different things. So when I have been building businesses, I look at how am I distributing? How am I getting people to my business and the purpose of it? And then I go backwards. So in historically building a finance company is how am I going to distribute it? So obviously it was we did medical procedures, dental, veterinary, home improvement, etc. How did I distribute my finance products? And that was loans. So I looked at, I'm just going to loan money. So the idea was I'm going to loan money. But how do I get people to borrow from me? So what we did to simplify it is went out to doctors' offices and said, instead of your patient coming in and saying, I need veneers, or my pet has emergency surgery, I don't have 5,000 pounds or dollars, or you go into the plastic surgeon and say, for one of the biggest ones was, I need breast implants. And then they say, well, that's going to be 7,000 pounds or $7,000. We went out to the doctors and said, why don't you offer your patients our finance product? And then instead of saying it's 7,000 pounds or dollars, or 7,000 pounds or dollars for your dog to go to emergency, or 4,000 pounds or dollars for whatever home improvement you want to put in a new toilets and you don't have the money. These were unsecured loans. But so the patients would go into the doctor's offices. We didn't market to the patients. We marketed to the doctors. So in the end, I ended up signing up 16,000 doctors, and all of them offered our financing to their patients. And then we did a platform where patients could ask questions. So you might be saying, I'm thinking of getting a hair transplant. So not you, but someone might be saying something like that. And then they say, so often men will have what they call just a little bit of receding hairline, but not full on loss. They might be saying, should I get an incision where you can just pull the hair together, or should I get plugs? So then they would ask that question on our website. So we had a separate website. And then we signed up the same doctors on a separate website, not the finance one, who could answer questions. And those doctors would get more patients because they'd start answering the questions for the patients. And the patient would be plugging in by their postal code. So the doctors would get more patients. So we started to help people get more business. So you have to think not about the idea. It's how do you distribute it, and how do you satisfy the channel that distributes your product through. It could be any product. And you don't have to come up with the idea initially, but if you come up with the idea, you figure out your distribution, then how do I hold on to it? How do we get better than the competitors that come out there?
And you're building their businesses at the same time for them as well. So it's win, win, win.
And you start out and you know you're going to have competition, but you just keep improving and getting better and better and better. And if you ignore nowadays, if you ignore the media channels, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, if you YouTube, if you ignore that, you are not building a business. You are irrelevant if you are not on social media. You actually don't exist. You are, it's like you're having a conversation, all of a sudden you say something and then it's like, whoa, there's nothing, because you don't matter if you're not on social media.
Yeah, people can't find you. Absolutely.
And if they can't find you or your business, then that's not, you don't have a business. So historically, when I was building businesses, I thought, well, what happens, because I'm an entrepreneur, what happens as I get older and I'm not working anymore? I can't pensions, I don't get any kind of anything because I'm self-employed. And so I thought, okay, what do I do? And I had 5 offices across the country, or national and international business. The bank said to me that, if you buy an office space, then you can put your office in there and we'll finance it, because I would be owner operated for my business. And so I went out and looked at an office space, and it was at the time, I think, $5 million. And then I found another office space, and I went back to them and said, there's a building that's $5 million. And I found 2, and they said, well, you have enough revenue, you can actually buy both. So I started buying buildings, commercial buildings, being owner occupied and putting tenants in there. And I would buy the buildings, put just enough down that the leases that came in covered the debt, the mortgages. So it wasn't residential real estate, it was commercial. But I was buying it, so just say 5% down, and then just say 95% would be covered by the tenants in the building. And so I started to buy buildings, and then I started to buy residential property, renting that out through agencies. And then I thought, if I'm going to buy something, I want to like it, because I did multiple degrees, and my first degree was interior design, and I love really nice things. So I went to, I started to buy buildings that I loved and properties that I loved that were pieces of art. And one was very Japanese-like, and so I did it all Japanese decor through it. And one had First Nations, which is Native Indian, and it had all these totem poles and First Nations paraphernalia from the last company that owned the building and throughout the building. And then just after we had closed, they came to me and asked if I wanted to buy any of the art, and I said, I'll buy it all. So I bought a whole collection of art, which were big kayaks and totem poles. And then I've done the building and kept it around the First Nations theme.
And is that all in Toronto?
No, that's in Vancouver.
Okay.
And then I started to buy properties in the US and like Hawaii, and then theme it. So when it came to, we moved to England and became residents. Now, these are all income earning, where the cost is meeting what the revenue is meeting. The cost and the revenue are equal. And so you always want to have debt on, I don't have debt on all the buildings, but you like to have debt on the buildings, because then you're not paying interest on the mortgages. So you have to weigh that out. But then eventually, after 25 years, I paid off all the buildings and all I have is revenue. And that was the idea. When it came to the castle, we had moved to England as residents, and my husband and I respectfully left our businesses. Our youngest of 6 kids moved out and went to university in the States. We dropped them off and said, bye, we're moving. And we had no more business, and we were still young, and their kids had all moved out. And my husband and I said, the world is our oyster. Let's go live life. And with flights and things, we can visit our kids. They're scattered all over, all of them university or finished, all of them very, very, very good people. They're not concerning individuals. They're people of value, I would say. And meaning that they're just nice kids. And so I was never worried about any of them. And we decided, since my mother's English and my husband's Irish, we'd move to England. And I did my doctorate and my master's of science at Henley Business School. So I'm very used to coming to England. So part of the requirement was that you had to lease or buy your home. So when you're non-resident, you move as a non-domicile resident. We came in on an ancestry visa. The algorithm or the checkbox, you need to lease or rent. You can't stay in a hotel or something. So I said to my husband, having done a lot of real estate, that I felt, this is 3 years ago, I felt the interest rates were going to go up. I thought we were in an inflationary market and that it would make no sense to buy real estate in England. It's just going to, even if it goes down by 10%, you've had a 10% loss. And what we looked at a few apartments, and the entry level in London was 8.5 million pounds for an apartment, and 45,000 or 48,000 a year for the fee that you pay when you live in an apartment building, like a flat, for the front desk and the concierge and that. So we were looking in Belgravia and Knightsbridge and Mayfair. So I said to my husband, let's just go rent a place and then forget buying everything. 8.5 million pounds. No way. I'm not spending that on an apartment that could depreciate. And then so we just rented. We didn't buy. And then I thought, everything's so expensive in London. Like, this is insane compared to the rest of the world. So I thought, I wonder what a house costs. So I started Googling and I thought, wow, a house on the outskirts of London is cheaper than an apartment. And then I Googled more and there was this castle. And I thought, this castle is cheaper than the flat in
That's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
London. So
Yeah.
I just, out of curiosity, had no idea, no intention of buying a castle. I texted the broker and he didn't respond. So I just dropped the whole idea. So we're going back less than 2 years ago. And then I had hosted 3 TV shows in Canada. And then I was on the Real Housewives of Toronto. And I'd always loved TV because my brain is more more math, but I like the creative side. So my doctorate was in writing algorithms and finance, and my master's of science is in finance. My MBA is in finance, but I also did interior design. And so I need to satisfy both sides of the brain. I like the creative, but I'm actually antisocial and not like I really keep to myself, very private. But I love creative. So that when you'd like that, and you're asked to do a lot of TV shows, I was asked to do these shows, probably because I'm weird. Anyway, so they had asked me to do a show, actually my own TV show on entrepreneurship in Canada. And they wanted it to be entrepreneurship for women. And I said, I don't think you need to be a woman. And what's the difference if you're a woman or a man? You're either good at what you do or you're not. And I don't care if you're what race you are, what your preferences are. You get over all those things. Like, get over the challenges. We're all different. But I didn't want to single out female entrepreneurs unless it was in a challenged country where women weren't allowed to work or wouldn't be paid. Then that would be interesting. But I said, okay, I'll do the show because they really wanted me to focus on women. And then so simultaneously, less than 2 years ago, I'm up and it's been greenlit for a TV show. And 6 weeks later, approximately, this broker calls me, texts me and says, hey, that castle was sold under sale and the deal fell through that I inquired about. He said, do you want to go and look at it? So we're going back November 2000, I don't know what year we're in, 25, 23, 22, November 2022. And I said, yeah, I guess I'll go look at it. And it had been sold, it had been under sale for 11 million pounds. And the assessment was close to 40 million pounds. And the replacement value on the insurance is 35 million pounds or vice versa, one of the two, 40 and 35. But it was the sale market. Of course, we're in a bad inflationary market. You cannot get a loan on a castle. It's just too expensive to run. And there's not a big market for people buying castles because the operating cost is so high. So I said, okay, I'll just come and look at it, but I'm not interested in buying it. That I'm curious. what does a castle look like? So I said to my husband, let's go look at this castle tomorrow. And he said, we're not buying a castle. And so we drove down to Kent and we looked at the castle, and it was absolute disaster. It had not been looked after in 30 years. It had furniture piled up upstairs. It was awful. We actually videotaped all of it going in there. There were dead animals in the pool area, which was a pond, like dead fox. And it was just awful. And there was all the floors were peeling up and things, but the stone structure was nice. And so I looked at them and I said, okay, we'll buy the castle, without consulting my husband.
I was about to say his reaction was.
and I said, we'll buy the castle, but we're only giving you 6.5 million pounds, half of the other offer. Take it or leave it. And so I thought, if I'm going to buy this, and I'm going to have to invest this much money in it, I might as well offer lower. And if they don't want to take it, then don't take it. But I knew it was a tight market, and they took it begrudgingly. So then we went under survey. And one of the things that when you're an entrepreneur, you always have to figure out how to fund all your operations. And so this is still entrepreneurial to buy a castle, because I've got to fund the operations. And so why not? They had a wedding venue. They'd never been open to the public or anything. But why don't I reopen and put a wedding venue in? I didn't buy the business, because that would be buying an operating business. I only bought the wedding. I bought the castle, the bones. But at that point, we had a survey. So I called up. So back to doing the Entrepreneurship for Women, I called up the production company and said, I've got an offer in on a castle. Wouldn't it be interesting to do a show about renovating a castle? So there's my distribution. If I got picked up to do a show about renovating a castle, then I have my distribution and my marketing is paid for.
Yeah, I was about to say, so the marketing, is paid for, and you're building the audience who would want to. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Mm.
So then I got a call in February 23, the end of February 23. It was a Friday, and I got a call from one of the producers, and he said, "Guess what? Your show got picked up in the U.S. and investors, and it's a go. Queen of the Castle, the name, the show has been picked up."
Great.
But we hadn't closed on the castle, and we got in the same day the survey report back.
Oh, what was
so
that?
The survey,
like?
This thick, plumbing, whatever that's called, foul drainage, the electrical, the bats, the rats, the beetles, the oil tanks, the water heaters, the radiators, everything had to be replaced. And so I said to my husband, there's no way we're spending 5.5 million on this castle, 6.5 million on the castle. And so I went back to the sellers and said, all right, no, I got the call that our show was picked up, but I went back to the sellers and said, the survey report, you didn't disclose this when we were making the deal, how much damage there was. I will buy the castle and give you cash tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., but I'm taking $1 million off. I will give you 5.5 million tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., take it or leave it. And they said, F you. Am I allowed to say F you on your podcast? They said, F you. So I'm sitting with my husband that night and we're at dinner, and I said, the show got picked up. That's the good news. And I said, the other is that I took $1 million off the price because there's so much damage, and it's going to cost at least that. Just to fix the roof tiles is $1 million, because you have to surround the whole castle with scaffolding and etc. So that's $1 million just to fix the roof tiles. And I said, the bad news is that it took $1 million off the price. And he said, just phone them up and tell them you're going to give the 6.5 million. I said, no. I said, just wait. The phone will ring. And so we're sitting at dinner, and he was like this, like, just give them the other $1 million. And I said, no, just wait. So 10 o'clock that night, they phoned back, and the broker phoned back and goes, they're taking it. They were mad. And I had to wire 10 a.m. the next morning, 5.5 million pounds. And we got the castle. No, I was actually being honest, because it is a lot of money to renovate a castle. So now we had this show, which is now being picked up in 7 countries. Now we're on our 2nd season, just finishing it. We've got the show, the distribution, and then you have to differentiate yourself. So when you're an entrepreneur, when you are successful, even if you start a business, you need to differentiate yourself. And so the show is very quirky. It's very funny, and it's you know in all the episodes, I'm wearing a tiara and a gown, and I'm out working the diggers and helping the people working at the castle. And we're building our businesses. We've opened restaurants. We've opened the wedding business. We've got an event space, farmers market, all that kind of stuff. And all of it shows all of the challenges of opening a grade one listed building and expanding operations. And so I think being an entrepreneur and knowing how do you market, how do you do TikTok, Instagram, it's you have to understand your TikTok and Instagram to be able to market yourself. And you have to market yourself, your personal brand. When you're an entrepreneur, you will be more successful as having a personal brand and learning how to market that too. So differentiate yourself personally. And so most people are like, no, I don't want to do that. It's just black and white. I'm not going to go out there and be as flamboyant. That's for you, Anne. I don't want to do that. But the difference is when you do that and you become a brand unto yourself and your true self, you get more attention than if you want to just fall into the wallpaper and blend in, because you have to think about marketing your personal brand. And I don't like doing social media. It's the least favorite thing that I could ever do. But I know if I don't market social media, that people will look me up. And if I'm not on the internet, they can make assumptions. But if I don't do much, then they find things that I don't want them to find. They might find me without makeup on and someone's taken a picture or something like that. Or but if I market myself in social media wearing weird gowns and doing funny little skits, that's what they're going to find. So I don't put out, you won't find much with my children because I'm private in my personal life. I don't put things out of who my friends are because I don't want friends that want to do Instagram pictures with me. I like my friends to myself. So you don't see me with friends. You don't see my social circle unless we plan to do something. And you don't see my children unless they want to do something for a one-off with me. But and what you see out there is me in a gown or me doing a funny skit. And that's the Anne I want people to know, not the Anne that is the real Anne. The real Anne. So being an entrepreneur, you need to define your brand. You need to be okay doing TikTok and Instagram. And you need to figure out how to do TikTok and Instagram. And, that means in TikTok, how long are the clips? And so you probably 15-second clips, but how do I grasp someone? In TikTok, you got to grasp them in the first second. You've got to get people and you've got to keep them engaged. And on Instagram, it's more, you got a little bit longer. You can go a minute and 20 seconds, but it better not be boring. And you've got to figure out how to engage people. And so both of them are videos, should both be reels and not horizontal, vertical reels. And you need to be engaging. And people don't want to look at photos anymore, not much photos. They want to look at things moving and they want to be entertained. And they don't have an attention span longer than 10 or 15 seconds. So.
And what was the reaction of your kids like in general? Was it kind of one reaction from the six of them or varied reactions?
When we buy castles and things like that?
Yeah, and the TV show, yeah.
They really are not interested in the castle. They went like, oh, cool, and they've come out to visit. But we own, I don't know, 14 or 15 properties worldwide, and they're all over the top. And so the castle is one of those that's over the top. And it's the things that we offer at the castle. The way we decorate it is very much like a castle with knights in shining armor. Some of them are pink and some are orange and some are green. And some of them are drinking beer and some of them are doing like a selfie shot like this and they're holding an iPhone. These are the knights. So there's really fun, quirky things. Yeah, because in those things, if someone is offended and say we do a wedding at the castle, we can move the knights out of the way. But for example, one wedding, woman who loves orange and pink, married a military Gurkha, And so we had the Gurkha shield put on one of the nights, and it's in green and she's in orange. And we set that up at the castle. And, so just a nice little thing we could do for brides and grooms with all these colorful nights. Somebody had a pink wedding, and I ran into the couple at the castle, and I said, "Hey, we've got all these pink candlesticks. Would you like those at your wedding instead of the white ones?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then I said, "Hey, you know what? I've got a pink night upstairs. Do you want the pink night?" And so you can put the pink night, and the nights have all been deconstructed, and they're like mannequins inside that have flexibility. So you can close their hands, and the staff always does the finger with the nights. So I'll be walking by and the nights like this. And so we're closing but not when people are in there, but the knights can be holding the flowers in their hands. So you can have a pink knight and a bouquet of flowers, and it can match the bride's dress. And so we look at fun things to differentiate. My kids, on the other hand, are like, "Mom, like, really?" And they have always done things like, "Can you act like a mother?" And it's like, well, like, I do act like a mother. I cook the meals and things, but why can't we have children, and why can't we have fun? It's not like I'm hurting anybody. I just love comedy. And I've done a lot of stand-up comedy, and that stand-up comedy came with doing a lot of public speaking. And I learned that if you take stand-up comedy lessons, it helps you to engage an audience better. Because when you're doing stand-up, you've got to read your audience, and every word you say counts. You set people up for a joke. And so I started to take stand-up comedy to help my public speaking. And then I mentioned that to Sick Kids Hospital. I was doing a fundraiser, and they asked me to speak to women entrepreneurs, and I did. And I said, during COVID, so it was online, and I said, do something for yourself. For instance, I do stand-up comedy, and I do an online course. I did in person, and during COVID, I did online. And then Sick Kids came to me after and asked if I would compete in stand-up comedy. And I went, uh-oh, like, I've never at that time did it. And so I started to take lessons in London, the Bill Murray studio, and did stand-up comedy courses, and then private training, and just absolutely fell in love with the challenge of stand-up comedy. And then I performed and competed and did all that. And it's so hard. But in that, I talked about what was true to me, and that is raising 6 kids and keeping my husband entertained. And my children were mortified that I would talk about raising children. And it was talking about taking the boys and giving them all a box of Kleenex and some hand lotion and just leaving them in their rooms during puberty. And like, it was like, yeah. And they're like, "Mom, how could you do that?"
Say that.
Well, you can, because everyone would relate to it. If I said my kids were all normal and good, no one would believe me. If I said I put the box of Kleenex in a room, a hand lotion, when I have 4 boys, and that's what I did, they would believe me. They'd relate to it. So I think the kids don't like the truth, because they didn't say, "Mom, that's not true." They said, "Mom, how can you say that?" So are we supposed to not, like, the funniest thing in life is the truth. So comedians tell the truth, and except for maybe Jimmy Kimmel now, but they get away with the truth, where if you're a serious public speaker and you're not joking, you can't say what a comedian can say, because on an entrepreneur show, you can't say what a comedian would say if you're talking about business, but a comedian can say the same thing and make a joke about it and get away with it. So put comedy in your life. And I did, even when I was in finance, I still put comedy in. When I had a meeting with bankers, because I was always in raising money to loan money, I had someone in the corner going, "Show me the money," like, "Show me the money." And we did things that just made them laugh, and people love to laugh. You've got to be serious about your business. Don't take your business too seriously that you can't enjoy doing it.
How did you start yourself then, like, initially, to go, like, way back. You've built these businesses now, but for people listening who are maybe sitting on an idea and maybe they don't come from money or the right background or privilege, what advice would you give to those people who are just, sitting on that idea and not taking action?
So I was a single mom with no money, no support from my ex-husband. His name was Gone with the Wind, by the way, and no support from Gone with the Wind, and two babies, two little children. And I was, I had an idea, and I worked full time, and the only way that I could make it work was to do work because I had to pay the rent and start my business simultaneously. And I think often when I see entrepreneurs or speak at a conference or something like that, someone will say, they can't afford to do this, they can't afford to do that, they want to have this car, they want to get married, they want to have kids. Well, if you want to be a true entrepreneur and take risks, you're going to have to focus on the business, and all the other things you've got to put to the side. Now, I already had kids, so I couldn't just go, okay, I'm going to return them. And so you've got to figure out how to make it work. So I was doing night shifts. After the kids went to bed, I rented out a room. So you solve for each hurdle. I rented out a room in my rented apartment to somebody that would come in after 8 o'clock when my kids were already in bed, and they would be there at the apartment. So they rent out the room. They would be there at the apartment when I went to work at night. So I did night shifts, and somebody was with the kids. And, I had them trained so they didn't wake up during the night. But if they did, they could call me. So I had to solve for that. I had to solve that I couldn't afford much. So that renting out the room did that. And then my kids wore clothes that I bought at the discount places, and like T-shirts and jeans. And they weren't wearing designer clothes. I was buying secondhand clothes so I could wear a suit to work. And who cares? And it was, you just have to figure out for that. Now, when it comes to the business side of it, when I started to be an entrepreneur and started a business, it was figuring out how to raise funds at the same time you're figuring out how to do your operations. So I pitched, I guess, 35 investment banks, and was the door slammed on all of them. But every time I'd say why. And if it was something like I didn't show a pro forma, I didn't know what a pro forma was, next time I made a pitch, I'd have a pro forma. Then the next time I'd say, why did you turn me down? And they said, you don't know your market. You don't know your competitors. The next time I had a book. So I had a bound book that would say competition on the front. So then by the time I walked into the last one, I had this stack of books, competitors, pro forma, market and distribution, all that stuff, all the reasons that I was turned down. I was so well prepared. I also learned that nobody wants to loan you a little bit of money. So if you're going out and looking for 50,000 or 100,000, they're not interested, because you have to look at the stakeholders. When you want to do something, you want to show them how they're going to make money from you. And if they're going to make 3% or 5%, then 5% of 1,000, 10,000 is not that much. 5% of 1,000,000 is. So I learned I got to ask for more money, but I have to show them how are they going to get it back. So one of my things was, what's in it for you? And so that helped me to setting up a business. And I never talked about being a single mom with two kids. They did not know, even never. No one knew how much I was struggling. No one knew anything. I just appeared successful, but I never said I was successful. I just appeared successful. And I always kept the talk on the business side of things. And oh, sure, yeah, like, oh, this coffee is nice, something like that. But always kept the talk on the business side of things. And I think my attention to focus on business helped, and that people didn't know that I was a single mom because I would be profiled. And it was really starting the business. And then for years and years and years, I never took any money out of that business. I paid myself a set salary, and I did not use the money that was generated through the company to go and buy a nice car or to buy my kids nicer clothes. That money went back into the business, and I grew it. And I slowly grew it. So I started out with a small business, and then it grew. It grew in the first month. the first 12 months, I did $1 million in business. In the 13th month, a month later, in that month alone, I did $1 million, and it just kept growing. So once I got there, it took off, and I never stopped my other job until I could afford to pay myself. So yeah, I worked 2 jobs.
Yeah. For how long then, Anne? When did you?
Probably 3 years.
Oh, wow.
So
Right.
because then I had to hire staff and an office and all that kind of stuff.
Overheads
And
go
then
up. Yep.
for all the years I had that, I had the same desk. And one time my chair broke and I changed the chair because the other one broke, like an office chair. But what anybody saw, because we had call centers, was irrelevant, because all they saw was my marketing material. And so as much as I'm viewed as this, I'm tight with every single dollar and every penny, I guess you call it every pound or whatever. I care about so much about what I spend. And yes, I'm philanthropic now. And I was when I didn't have money, but it's at a different level. And so, you give what you can always. Interesting about England is that they don't like money. If anybody has any wealth, they don't like you. And so the problem with, I find, being in Britain is that there's this, and probably worldwide with women in particular, and in Britain, is that there's this like, go, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And then once you are successful, it's like, oh, how come that's not me? Oh, she must have got her money the wrong way.
Anymore. Yeah.
No. And so it is a little bit defeating, but you have to ignore the noise. And then the challenges in Britain, I find, from running a business is the cost of operations, especially with certain governments where suddenly you're taxed on things, or you have to pay so much pension and things that some of it doesn't make any sense of your cost of operations. But I think you just have to get over it. Complaining doesn't help. It's like figuring out how to get over these hurdles. And yeah, your operational costs might go up. Then you say to yourself, so just use an example, currently at the castle, the cost of employees goes up this year. Do I pass that on in our restaurant at the castle, where we raise our cost of croissants or coffee or sandwiches or whatever we're selling? And then you can't get the two mixed up, because if we raise the cost of a cup of coffee, is that what the market is doing? So you might just have to eat, no pun intended, eat some of it. So you're making less. So you have to figure out how to make a bit more money in the operations that you're in. So obviously for me, I want to make more money because we need to cover our overhead. So, all right, we're going to sell merchandise. So I could use the same employees to say, all right, here you're coming in and you're having a cup of coffee. Would you like to buy our special Castle coffee mugs? And so now we're starting to make money from the same employees selling our coffee mugs, and then we add them to online, and now we're selling the coffee mugs, and then we open up merchandise that could go with it. So you don't figure it out when you're first starting a business, but figure out your distribution. Don't get yourself in the way, because you're the one that gets in the way of you get out of your own way. In my sad life of being a single mom and gone with the wind, leaving, that I had to get out of it. I was not going to have my sad story be my definition. And I wasn't going to have my fears of being an entrepreneur and not knowing what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. Half the time, I don't know what I'm doing, but I hire good people that do. I hire people for their skills, because I know I don't have a lot of skills in accounting and things like that, or HR, so I hire people with skills, and then I look for people with the skills, but I hire people for their values. So we have a cultural similarity in our organization where everyone's happy. And to me, I need skilled people, and I need happy employees. And we pay fairly, if not a little bit more fairly than the next person or the next company, but it's the joy and the fun that we have. And I think for new people starting out that don't have means, you can figure it out. You can find investors. You can do that, but you need to create it's not the idea. you cannot walk in a room and say, hey, I've got a really good idea. You actually have to structure that good idea and show that you may not know what you're doing now, but you do know how to execute it. And you do need to show where the success is going to be. So I wasn't convincing people when I started a finance company, of that the finance company was going to be successful. It's a finance company. I was convincing them that I could build a successful finance company and showing them how the money would be made. I don't know where I'm going to get the money from. This is where I'm going to approach. I'm going to approach this investor, this investor, this investor. And then remember, there are people out there that do want to invest in entrepreneurs if they show they can launch. Now, if you leave out a tech component, if you leave out AI, you will not get an investor. So you have to show the AI component. Now, how would I show that in a castle? I would show that in the algorithm of our marketing online, that we're using an AI derived marketing plan. So the castle's not AI, but you show how you're incorporating AI, and artificial intelligence can be just as much of a regression model algorithm, and then it starts to create its own outcomes as you get more data in there. So you just have to show that you're using AI and how you're going to use it. And how do you show you're using AI? Go on Chat GPT and ask them about your business and how you can show using AI. So it's that simple, but it's not simple if you think that your idea is really cool, but you don't have it mapped out. And then you show your marketing. One of my son's friends started a dating app, but he showed how he was marketing it at bringing people together at nightclubs. But he showed something that was a little bit more entrepreneurial than just creating a dating app. So he was bringing people to actually meet each other and doing that at nightclubs. So very successful in raising money because people like the idea. I don't know how his site is doing, but look at all your stakeholders, and one of them is investors, not just your distribution, not just your suppliers, not just your customer, but it's also your investors and also yourself and how you're perceived. So don't ignore any of those.
Interested to know. So last question for you before a couple of quick fire questions, and would be, if you hadn't taken that leap initially to start your first business, where do you think you would be now, and what would you be doing? Has that ever crossed your mind, or is that consigned to the past?
I don't think about what I didn't do, but while I was building my finance company, and I started investing in real estate, and then I started to write books. So I've written 6 or 7 books now. And I just thought, if I'm going to get out there, and when I finish finance, or if anything ever shifts or I lose my position in finance, what do I want to do? I need to create a brand. So I started to write books, and I started to public speak. So I was being asked to, because I was a successful entrepreneur, at least people thought I was. And so I started to be asked to. Then I applied to become part of a speakers bureau. And then I started to put myself out there as a public speaker. Now, the first time somebody asked me to speak, they said, well, what do you charge? And I said, okay, I'll get back to you with that. I didn't know what people charge. So then I asked them, what do you charge to do this talk? And they go, I charge $5,000. So I went back and said, yeah, my rate's $5,000. But I mean, if the other person told me it was $1,000, I would have gone back and said my rate's $1,000. If they told me it was $30,000, I would have gone back, my rate's $30,000. I had no clue. And the same thing with the books is, I don't know how to write a book, but you can ask people that do. And I was doing a lot of public speaking on the first book I wrote, and I was speaking to doctors about marketing their medical practices, and I would have slides. And then I wrote a book on marketing your medical practice during turbulent times. And this was in the economic downturn back in 2009. So I was talking to doctors about the economic downturn and how to market your practice during an economic downturn. And then I took my slides and made them into chapters. And then that became the chapters of my book. So I learned the structure and how to do the chapters, and then to go back to the beginning. And I had so much fun doing that. I just kept writing books. And then when I was asked to speak at medical conferences, a lot were to doctors, I would say, well, instead of my fee, I want you to buy a book. So I want you to buy 500 books instead of my fee. So they would buy 500 books. And so I was trying to get on the bestseller list by selling so many books. I never got on the bestseller list, but I tried. And so I was forfeiting, but I was marketing myself to the more people that read my books, the more people. So you got to give up sometimes the revenue and realize that the books aren't about being like fantastic or relevant to every audience. They're a marketing tool for yourself. And the TV is a marketing tool. And you look at different ways while you're building, while you're marketing yourself as an entrepreneur. Look at other ways to get out there. Write articles for magazines, or write articles online, or write blogs, or do other ways to market yourself while you're building your business that markets the person that you want to be, and with the brand. Yeah, markets the person you want to be with the brand. And you'll be a little bit better at, or a lot better at, really establishing that you're somebody that somebody would want to invest in, because you've got more tools out there that they can readily find about you, if that makes sense. Fake it till you make it.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Quick fire round to finish. There's a couple of questions for you, Anne. So first thing that comes into your head, short, snappy answers for you. First one, what is an entrepreneur? What defines an entrepreneur for you?
Well, I think it's somebody who takes the risk in starting up a business. I think that the misconception is what's a good entrepreneur and what's an entrepreneur, because everybody's an entrepreneur. It's a good, successful one has a strategy and can learn how to execute that business. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're a business person, because there's a difference, but an entrepreneur takes that risk and creates an idea and executes.
What do you think the UK needs to do? So this is a bit interesting answer, given that you're originally from Canada, etc. What does this country need to do to get more startups?
In this country, and I'm not a political person, this country needs to support the startups. So this country does not support new business. In fact, I think there has to be an infrastructure where someone says, how can I get afford to be able to even start my own business, and I'm not going to get squashed within a year or 2 years. So it needs to be more supportive of entrepreneurs. I think things like conferences and etc. of helping people is very good, but we make a mistake of blaming the government. A government is the government, and anywhere you go, politics is politics. So you have to get around the government not being supportive. I mean, the answer is this government is not supportive. The other solution is forget what the government is doing, get over it, and still go for what you're going for, but figure out how to navigate the waters given this government. And you just cannot change it, and you cannot blame the politicians. It is just one of those hurdles that is not going to be supportive. Your answer is not going to the government and getting support. It's figuring out how to navigate around there. There's nothing the government is going to do to support you. In fact, they don't want to support startups because they're not successful. They're not going to be donating to their campaigns because you're starting a business. So they don't even like you.
Yeah, no, it's a really good answer. What is a scale-up business for you? How does that differ?
So scale-up business would be, I actually did this with my finance company, is I got 15% growth a year. And how do you grow that? Now, when you're building a business, you look at your costs, you look at your fixed costs, and you look at your variable costs. So what you want to do is know when you have variable costs, and you always will in any business. So even if you have a podcast, there's a fixed cost and then there's a variable cost. And then there's the revenue that comes in. So when you're building something, a business, know your fixed costs and then know your variable costs. And usually your variable costs your fixed costs, at some point you break even on your fixed costs. And your variable costs you should keep as small as you can. So your fixed costs you break even, your variable costs you keep small, but you need to know where your break even point is. So if you have a 15% growth a year and you're in a startup mode and you're scaling up, know where your break even point is. and keep those variable costs small. So when you've got a scale up business, and then you want to be realistic of your growth too. So is it 15%? Is it 20? Generally, when you're growing a business, you'll have that 15% growth for a few years, but then it'll taper off. So you have to look at how you can expand on your own business model to make more money without changing your fixed cost, if that makes sense. And that was talking about the coffee, and then why don't we sell the coffee cup too? And so your scale up business, it's very easy to go with 5 employees. It's very easy to have 15% growth in the first year. It's easy to have 100% growth because you're starting from nothing, or more than 100%. But you have to keep that growth going, and you also have to think of, in any business, your waste as well. So if it's clothing, or what are you wasting money on? But you've got to think initially. Sure, you're starting podcast. I've got 1 follower. So you have to know, where do you break even on this? And you have to pay attention on who's paying. Like, how do you do that? And you have to stay within your values. So sure, we can get a lot more clicks if we're disrespectful or rude or something like that, but stay within your values of who you are. Don't do things to go, I got more followers. That's not very nice. So, or else that's you. And if that's you, you're going to get a different audience. So know your audience as well, but figure out, when you're starting, don't be afraid that you've only got 1 person watching your podcast, but change it to be self-critical. Change it if you're not getting 2 people or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And switching to North America a little bit then with this question, why do you think North America is better at producing scale-ups and unicorns than the UK?
Well, there's more entrepreneurs. You've got Silicon Valley. You've got the entrepreneurial idea. I think the UK does not support entrepreneurs, doesn't support investors into the UK. I mean, I'm sure, like, right now there's all this hype that they're going to get more AI, etc. It doesn't matter. That's AI is global, and you have to look at who's saying things, whether that stuff is true or not. But the truth is, the United States has more entrepreneurial thinking than the UK does. And so don't let it squash you because you're in England. Get entrepreneurial thinking. What's the difference between a UK and a US citizen is the mindset. So act like an entrepreneur and forget that you're in the UK. There is Silicon Valley, but now, I mean, the UK has people you can reach out to, you can hire. When I was running finance, I got India. I reached out in India to do the platforms, and people would apply for a loan, and then we'd have to say yes or no, you're approved. I had to get quite a bit of development work on our platforms I used somewhere else. So what's the difference between me being in Canada and reaching out to where some of those platform builders are situated? Or if you're in UK, or if you're in the US, they're still using the platforms from India. So what's the difference? Yeah, there's more entrepreneurs probably in the US than there are in the UK.
100%. And last question for you, just to round up, which founder do you inspires you the most? And that could be somebody like going back into your past, or that could be somebody like right now who's come on your radar that is inspiring you.
Richard Branson is probably the most inspirational for me as a business person. And I do business with him. So I bought an island next to Necker Island, and part of an island. And so I've gotten to know Richard a little bit. He definitely would not be talking about me, but I talk about him because observing him, I don't care what anybody thinks about anybody. He's a very normal person. He's has a part of his business. He's probably not public about it, but he looks at the values and philanthropy side of his business and where he can help. And he actually has a team focused on that. And so he also is very self-aware of brand development. He's very willing to do TV. He's very willing to do things because he knows how important that is. So I observed him in his brand development, and all of my fears of being public when I'm an entrepreneur were, okay, that makes sense. You've got to be out there. And So I'm in no way a Richard Branson. I have a completely different personality. And he's extremely well known and a very good entrepreneur. He sort of told me, this is how he didn't say that to me in particular, but you've got to market yourself and brand yourself. The second thing that he does is, we were driving around Mosquito Island, and he was driving it actually in a like a buggy, a go-kart, a golf cart kind of thing. And then he noticed that there wasn't any place to turn on one of the drives along the beach. And so right away he called someone and said, come out here and you need to fix this turn and that. He's paying attention to the smallest details of something. And so, yeah, I mean, in the castle, I go and do the dishes. If somebody isn't there and we're too busy and understaffed, I'm washing the dishes. I'm in there helping that put things on the table. I'm serving people. I'm doing things because you can't be lazy. And I observed him. I'm not a lazy person anyway, but he doesn't put himself up there on the pedestal that he's better than anybody, and approachable and a good business person and upfront. And I probably admire him. I don't know a lot of really big name entrepreneurs, but probably admire him more than others that I know of. I used to like Elon Musk until he went political. And I actually wrote an article that said, fuck off Elon Musk, and just said, you used to be really good. You'd help people, and you helped the guys in the tunnels, and you helped everyone. I said, but don't go paying people $1 million a day to go in some competition and vote for Trump. I said, that's not good use of your money. Don't get political. And I said, that's wrong. And then I didn't like him anymore as an entrepreneur. But before that, I loved his creativity, his ideas, everything. Just stay out of politics.
And I always tell this story as well. I worked for Richard for Virgin Atlantic for 17 years, and then I worked for his not-for-profit Virgin Startup, helping entrepreneurs get funding and mentoring for another 4 years. But when you mentioned like the attention to detail, I always remember whenever Richard used to come on the planes, and I'm going back to like the 90s and the 2000s now, instead of like sitting in upper class in, like a flatbed and enjoying the experience, he would sit in economy. He would get a pad and paper out, and he would walk around the plane, just speaking to customers and just asking them how their experience was and just writing all their answers down. And I was like in my 20s at the time, and I was just like, what's he doing? If that was me, I'd be up the front having a 7-course meal, watching a movie. And now you're like, I get it. I totally get it,
Yeah, exactly. So when we go to lunch on Necker Island, he actually sitting at the table, and it's, he just isn't above he's not above saying, how can I fix this business? And in getting his hands dirty. So I think as an entrepreneur, and I am an entrepreneur, is I'm involved in the business. You can ask me where anything in that castle is, and I can tell you where it is. I go into why are we having to put why when we're grouting the driveway where the stones are loose, why do we have to remove the stones? Why can't we just fill in the grout? And then why do we have to dig out the grout and then level it off? Why can't we just put it on top? And so I ask the questions of why, or go in there and just try and learn. Yeah, you got to know why you're doing things.
Yeah. Well, look, I've run over time as usual, but I really appreciate you taking the time. And I'm sure everybody listening and watching who hasn't seen the TV show will be really interested after what you've just said to go and check it out as well. So thank you very much indeed for your time. Much appreciated. You've got a very, very interesting story, and wish you all the best to your future businesses.
If this conversation resonated with you, don't just sit there, act on it. Make sure you follow or subscribe for more game-changing conversations, and remember, the only thing standing between you and your business breakthrough is the decision to screw it and just do it.